My name is Laurie Paris, and welcome to She Life. My mother, Catherine Smith Gatormson, whose mother is Catherine Victoria Smith, whose mother is Nancy Smith, whose mother is Marion Mackenzie, named me Laurie Jean. I knew only two of these four women, but I carry their blood in my veins and their memories in my bones. May I speak our collective truth in a way that makes good change in a world that needs great change. The time has come for you and I to take our rightful sacred place in a culture that denies it. This is my story and journey to uncover the truth that supports my right to do just that, no matter the cost. I hope you decide you deserve that sacred place too. Episode 4, The Shepherdess and Rennes-le-Château. The mystery of Rennes-le-Château is a complicated one and will not be easy to follow if you are unaware of the basics of the story. To help those who wish to have a better understanding of this mystery, I have pasted links to resources on the She Life website and YouTube channel that can get you up to speed. At the beginning of the 12th century, an inquisition began in France by the Roman Catholic Church to fight heresy and eliminate Christian sects that did not adhere to their teachings. One of the casualties of this inquisition were the Cathars, a French Gnostic movement between the 12th and 14th century. Another were the Knights Templar, also known as the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ, a wealthy Catholic monastic order of men founded in 1119. These militant and monastic men who wore white mantles with red crosses and were protected by the Pope saw their demise when King Philip IV, who was in debt to them, convinced the Pope they were committing heresy, hoping to see their order erased in France, along with his debt. The Pope caved under the king's pressure and had the Templars arrested on Friday, October the 13th, 1307, and 7 years later had their 23rd Grand Master, Jacques du Molay, burned at the stake. The articles of accusation of this Catholic Inquisition said that in each province the order had idols, namely heads, that they adored these idols, especially in their assemblies, that the heads were venerated, that they venerated them as God, that they venerated them as their savior. The Knights Templar told the inquisitors that the head could save them. In the book Holy Blood, Holy Grail, authors Bagent, Lee, and Lincoln write about the Templars and say, quote, "We found indisputable evidence for the charge of secret ceremonies involving a head of some kind. Indeed, the existence of such a head proved to be one of the dominant themes running through the Inquisition records. Among the confiscated goods of the Paris preceptory, a reliquary in the shape of a woman's head was found. It was hinged on top and contained what appeared to have been relics of a peculiar kind," unquote. The head worshipped by the Templars was the head of a woman. As shared in Podcast 3, I came upon the mystery of Rennes-le-Château and the woman Emma Calvé after watching a documentary called Henry Lincoln's Guide to Rennes-le-Château. I would stay connected to the story until today and discover that the mystery is not only about a Catholic priest that had unexplained wealth by discovering parchments that led to a treasure, but it was about a Catholic church fighting for survival in France and people trying to navigate human conditions of love, betrayal, greed, and addiction. It was about a burgeoning Gnostic movement in Paris with a wide array of intellectuals and celebrities advocating for a different Christianity, one that accepted gender equality along with other Gnostic teachings. It was also about the devil and Jesus, the goddess Isis, a talisman, and a skull. What I saw written on the tomb of the shepherds of Arcadia, painted by Nicolas Poussin in 1627, and then again in 1637, one of the few clues in the mystery of Rennes-le-Château that researchers deemed to be real, was much different than what has been shared to date. I found a secret society lost and in ruins, and a Catholic church trying to navigate a world stripped of its power after the French Revolution, with many of its priests fleeing to Spain. The same church that indoctrinated me into their belief system by the age of 7, sharing that when I turned 8, their age of reason, I would go straight to hell if I sinned. I knew that was not true, as I instinctively knew that the mystery of Rennes-le-Château was not about finding a monetary treasure. I felt an attachment to Emma Calvet that could not be explained, the woman that Henry Lincoln linked to the mystery of Rennes-le-Château and the priest Saunière, by filming a heart with the date 1891 and her name carved below it, a date that Saunière supposedly found ancient parchments and a secret. Believing in past lives, I would conclude that there was a possibility that I was the reincarnation of Calvet, maybe not the whole spirit of her, but a remnant of her memory left here on earth to haunt whomever had the misfortune to pick up on what had transpired to this poor woman. If one is to understand the mystery of Rennes-le-Château, one must understand the mindset of its participants and what was transpiring in the culture within France and the world around them. It was a complicated story, to say the least, and Emma Calvet's relationship with the devil's man Jules Bois, her husband Galileo Gaspari, and the founder of the Martinist order in France, Gerard Oncos, also known as Papus, saw her pulled deep into the world of the occult movement in Paris. By 1905, almost 100 years since Napoleon declared France neutral in affairs pertaining to religion, the law of separation of church and state became official, and the French Gnostic movement in Paris became stronger than ever, with Calvet and her partner for many years, Jules Bois, becoming deeply involved. Although there was no evidence at this time to link Calvet to the priest Saunière, there is little doubt he knew of this movement and the opera star. The Gnostic movement began to flourish in the salons and bookshops of Paris, with several magazines being published sharing their philosophies and recruiting others to join. One of these publications was called The Initiation, with a tagline, The Independent Philosophical Review of High Studies, a tagline most likely written by Papus, as he was the key proponent in this periodical's development. The Initiation was also on the Catholic Church's Index, a list of books and periodicals banned from being read by Catholics. The priest Saunière did not have to travel to Paris to know all the key players and what was transpiring in this movement that included Calvet. He could simply read about it in one of these magazines. In 2016, Tobias Churton published his book, Occult Paris, The Lost Magic of the Belle Epoque. Churton is a British author, scholar, and world authority on Gnosticism, Hermeticism, and Rosicrucianism. He also holds a master's degree in theology from Oxford. His book delves deep into the occult practices and the Gnostic movement of the Belle Epoque and the people involved to create a vivid picture of the world Calvet, her partner Bois, and the priest Saunière lived in. In 1891, same year the heart with Calvet's name was supposedly carved into rock, Papus established a supreme council of 12 men to guide his new Martinist order to help recruit and build a group of devotees to his Gnostic beliefs called the Unknown Superiors, of which Calvet and her partner Jules Bois were high priests. Being an unknown superior gave you the right to establish your own group of devotees and initiate people into the Martinist order, as Calvet is suspected of doing in the United States while touring, as shared in Churton's book, Occult Paris. Bois and Calvet were also interested in the mystical and magical side of Gnosticism and the emancipation of women, and Papus's Martinist order helped them in these esoteric and political goals. In Occult Paris, Churton also writes that, quote, the idea of the priestess had once been central to religion, but was now neglected. This was to banish half of the divine nature, the giving and loving and receiving part of nature. Woman is a magician of nature from her birth because she has great natural sensibility and innate and instinctive sympathy with the subtle intelligences of earth, air, fire, and water. Unquote. For many years, Calvet and Bois fought side by side for gender equality, with Bois writing books promoting the emancipation of women, such as The Future Couple, The Eternal Doll, Restless Womanhood, and The New Era. The Gnostic movement in France during the Belle Époque helped bolster a growing feminist movement that moved gender equality into mainstream conversation, with Emma Calvet immersed wholeheartedly. Their participation in the occult movement in Paris was of a serious nature, and while Calvet became an international opera star and earned large sums of money, Bois also wrote books concerning the occult, such as Satanism and Magic and the Little Religions of Paris, with a chapter dedicated to the cult of Isis. Curiously, in 1902, after a 2-year tour of Vienna, Turkey, Greece, Egypt, and Jerusalem, with mutual friends of he and Calvet, including Swami Vivekananda, and most likely financed by Calvet, Bois would have a private audience with Pope Leo XIII that he described as being one of the greatest moments of his life. This sentiment seems quite odd for a man who would live out of wedlock with Calvet, wrote extensively about the emancipation of women, was a known occultist who fought duels against magicians, was a high priest in the unknown superiors of Papist's Martinist order, whose publication, The Initiation, was on the index of banned books by the Catholic Church. Bois would convert back to Catholicism before his death in New York in 1943. The couple parted ways in 1910. The same year, the priest Saunière was summoned by his bishopric to be tried in an ecclesiastical court facing charges of trafficking in masses. François Béranger Saunière was born in 1842 in Montezels, France, and became the village priest of Rennes-le-Château from 1885 to 1909. Saunière was forced to become a free priest from 1909 until his death in 1917, after being permanently suspended by the church after refusing to move to a new parish as punishment for not sharing with his superiors where his growing wealth was coming from. He would continue to perform Mass for the villagers on an altar outside the Villa Bethania, the house he built next to his presbytery and church, but never lived in. Saunière was considered a man of God and loved by the people of his parish, who ensured on his tombstone he was given the status of being their priest from 1885 to 1917, including the years he had been formally suspended. Saunière was educated, had a taste for fine wine, had a brother Alfred, who belonged to the order of the Jesuits, a brother who was excommunicated from the church in 1904 and died of alcoholism shortly thereafter. He also had a maid that stayed loyal to him until her death in 1953. She is buried next to him in the cemetery beside the church. Saunière's part in the known mystery of Rennes-le-Château is quite simple and has two main components. The first component is a set of parchments he supposedly found in 1891 in the pillar of the altar in his church he was repairing, that led to all the codes and ciphers on tombstones and in his church of Rennes-le-Château. The second component is the unexplained wealth he accumulated during his lifetime. The parchments that Saunière discovered have been proven to be forgeries by several researchers, including Jean-Luc Chomel, a French researcher and author of many books, who as early as 1996 told the BBC that the parchments in the mystery of Rennes-le-Château were a hoax. And to date, his statement has been confirmed with the confession of Philip de Chérizy, one of the three tricksters involved in the mystery, who admitted to forging the priest's parchments in his book Stone and Paper. The other two tricksters were Pierre Plantard and Gerard Desaid, Desaid being the author of the book The Accursed Treasure of Rennes-le-Château, the infamous paperback that started Henry Lincoln on the trail of the priest and the secret, and Lincoln's lifelong endeavor sharing the story of Rennes-le-Château with the world. The parchments, an admitted hoax, is now removed from the story, and we are left trying to establish an alternate route to discover where the priest's wealth came from. This new route to his wealth and the people involved on this road is the true story of Rennes-le-Château, the story I will share in my book Mother Crucified in early 2024. On the morning of May 1st, 2008, I arrived in the village of Rennes-le-Château to look for clues of a connection between the priest Saunière and Emma Calvé that had been alluded to in Lincoln's documentary. Driving up the steep 4.5-kilometer road that did not have barriers was troubling, as I shifted gears carefully to avoid plummeting down the side of the mountain before reaching the village. It was not an easy endeavor, as my nerves were already rattled from my dream in the early morning hours of the devil who warned me not to tell anyone about the woman I saw crucified on the cross. I made it to the top of the mountain, parked the car, and found my way to a cafe to take a moment to calm down and prepare for the unexpected. The journal I kept on the trip to Europe said the smell of lilacs around the cafe was strong, as was the coffee, and that the village was busier than I imagined. The servers at the cafe prepared and expecting the tourists who arrived every spring, just as they expected the fragrance from the blossom of the lilacs. When I decided to travel to Rennes-le-Château, I had several years of researching under my belt, and it had been 8 months since sharing with Andrew Goff that I believed I was the reincarnation of Emma Calvé. That morning, I would visit the presbytery and museum with the life-size wax figures of Saunière and his maid. I must admit, I jumped when I came around the corner. I viewed travel logs of Emma Calvé that were among the priest's personal documents and keepsakes that were kept under glass. There was also a photo of Calvé in a nun's habit. I walked into the priest's hidden round room and touched the cool stone walls as I would touch the hand of the devil at the entrance of the priest's church, and remember the Buddha's teaching that the devil, or Mara, was to be viewed as part of the dual nature of existence on this planet, that he was nothing to fear. Bearing this in mind, I still lit a candle and said a prayer asking for protection, and let the powers that be know I was there. The church was empty, other than my traveling companion, who sat in a church pew and started to cry. She did not stop crying till we left 30 minutes later, sharing that the sadness inside the church was overwhelming. I would climb the 22 steps to the stone seat next to the exterior wall of Saunière's domain that had a wonderful view of the garden below and of anyone walking up the steps to the thoroughfare, also called a belvedere. A belvedere, from the Italian word beautiful view, is an architectural structure, usually attached to turrets or towers, surrounded by gardens and other delights for the wealthy to enjoy. Saunière's belvedere had all these attributes, plus an orangery, and at one time a pet monkey. As I sat on the stone seat, I imagined his home would have been a wonderful place to visit, especially in the winter when the fires would be lit in every building, the smell of burning wood permeating the air. I finally walked to the library and climbed the spiral staircase to the roof that had a 360-degree view of the Aude Valley. The wind was fierce and refreshing. I was here in Rennes-le-Château, France, in the domain of a man who had thousands of people worldwide looking for the secret that bought him this beautiful place to live, and more wealth than a small village priest should have. I did not find the secret that day. I felt the secret, and it felt me. And as I stood on the roof of the Magdala Tower, the wind blowing my hair astray, I knew I had set it free. I only stayed a morning in the village of Rennes-le-Château, but a man named Jean-Luc Robin stayed from 1994 until his death on March 12, 2008. Robin died unexpectedly from a heart attack the very night his party was elected to govern the village, and approximately 2 months before I would arrive on my research trip. Robin operated a small hotel in the village Bethania for 6 years from 1994 to 2000, and concluded that Saunier was a man with quite an ordinary life, and that he was not a pawn or a puppet of anyone. Robin believed Saunier was a man following his own destiny, who was living his own adventure, as Robin had, living immersed in the mystery of the priest, eventually running a successful cafe, and then a successful campaign to be mayor. Robin had access to Saunier's financial journals and confirms the priest received large sums of money, and as Robin followed the money, he said Saunier was a different man after he became wealthy. That Saunier, he said, became a man carrying a heavy burden. Andrew Goff, a London-based writer and TV presenter of historical mysteries that I mentioned in the previous podcast, interviewed Robin in December 2006 and shared that the bulk of Saunier's money came between 1895 and 1900, the same time Emma Calvé became an international star, her wealth skyrocketing and garnering her £20,000 for a single tour in the United States. That sum equates today to approximately £3.36 million or 5.5 million Canadian dollars. It would not be unrealistic to believe that Emma Calvé had the means to help finance part of the priest's renovations, as the villager of her hometown of Millau had suggested. Goff also asked Robin in the interview what it was like living in Saunier's home. Robin replied, "Not very pleasant, to be honest. I never felt at ease in this house. I liked the park. I liked the part of the property where I am now, the garden of Saunier's Villa Bethany. The house itself, I always felt it very hostile. Let me tell you something. While I was living in this house, I had the worst nightmares I ever had in my life, and they were always related with the devil and possessions and things like this. And I used to wake up shaking, sweating, and relieved to realize that it was only a dream." The devil is immersed in the mystery of Rennes-le-Château and the possession, perhaps the possession the priest was carrying and hiding when he came through the portal on the second floor of the farmer's mercantile, a possession that needs to be retrieved from him and given back to whom it belongs. I would end my trip to Europe in a town on the North Sea in Scotland, the home of my ancestors and home to the best fish and chips I'd ever eaten. I spent the last week resting and writing and collecting seashells on the seashore. I had walked in the shadow of the immensely successful feminist Emma Calvé, a woman whose singing voice was considered the best in the world during the Belle Époque. I would learn that her Castle Cabrières had once housed a Templar stronghold where one could imagine they would carry and house their sacred idol, the head they venerated as God, the head they venerated as their savior, the head of a woman.